the natives of the land. So who are the original people of the land? So we call them in the Australian domain uh, aboriginals. They are also known as indigenous. They are also known as tribal people. Okay, in our land they are more famous as tribal people. Okay, so tribal people. If you see the history of India, then also you will see that prior to the Aryan invasion in India, there were tribes, certain types of tribes they lived in India. Okay, so they were the natives of this place, and usually you see that they inhabited the jungles and the forests. They used to live there. Okay, they used to have a carefree life. After that, we got urbanization later, but initially, all of them were forest dwellers. Okay, so similarly, if you see Australian domain, you will find these aboriginal peoples are actually, you can call the original people of the land. Okay, so before British colonial empire established its rule, its power in Australian lands, these aboriginal people lived. So aboriginal, I think you understand, they are the original people of the land. Okay, and just like British going to Africa and saying that, saying that they colonized Africa. It was not. They didn't call it colonization, but they said that it was white man's burden to civilize peoples, and they called Africa to be a dark land. And they said that they will civilize that place. They'll bring proper religion to this place. So in the name of bringing civilization, in the name of white man's burden, they completely tortured the people of simple Africans. Okay. So similar thing happened in our country, and same pattern you will find in Australia. Okay, so in the same way, these British colonial empire, they established their role, saying that they mainly said that Australia is an inhabited place, nobody is there, so they will settle, they'll have a settlement there. Okay, so when they found the Aboriginal people, they drove out the people from their territories, saying that they were barbarians, they were uncultured people, and British will form its colony in order to civilize them. So this was the politics behind their colonial establishment in the land. So similar to other land, they called Indians uncivilized, and they said that they will come and establish civilization in India. So we were one of the most civilized countries in the world. Earliest civilization happened in our country. Okay, but they had this kind of superior feeling, and they disturbed our whole ethnography after the colonial settlements. Okay, similarly, same pattern they followed in Australia. So in the name of civilization, they brought a lot of violence, disquietude, difficulties in their land. Okay, so you will see that aboriginal characters, they are very unique in their own way. As far as cultural practices are also concerned, they are very different in their own way. Okay, and when they came in contact with these colonizers, and when other settlers also came and they made Australia multicultural country. Okay, so this whole history is not a simple one. There's a lot of bloodshed and violence. Okay, and lot of bloodshed has been caused to those natives of that place. All right, so um, in this way, with lot of disharmony, with lots of violence and disturbances, their identity was also completely disturbed by the uh, by the British intruders. Okay, so these aboriginal people, they were completely colonized by the colonizers. Okay, and these people were very simple, very innocent. They were voiceless, so they were easy victim of the colonizers. Okay, so although they resisted, they tried to fight against this British imperialism, but ultimately they were a simple lot. They couldn't do much in order to drive away the British imperial power. Okay, so you can see that until the time British colonized in Australia, it was completely aboriginal nation. Okay, but from the time this British came to Australia, from that time onwards, it is seen that mostly white people live there. Okay, so majority of the population now is white Australian people. Okay, so during these colonial days, Australia as a land for settlers was declared as terra nullius. Okay, initially these British people mainly they declared this place as terra nullius, Terra nullius, terra nullius. Okay, it means land inhabited by none. They declared this place, this land, as land inhabited by none. Okay, so this made all the settlers come and unlawfully wherever they wanted they settled that. Just because they declared it, they themselves declared it uninhabited land, so they settled wherever they felt like. Okay, so they forcefully evacuated those indigenous people. They threw them out of their territories. Okay, and they themselves settled there. Okay, so and they said that these aboriginal people did not have this idea of owning land. They believed that land owns them. Okay, so they were people who were very much attached to nature. Okay, they did not have this kind of ownership feeling. But when these colonizers came, they threw away the aboriginal people from their own lands, and they said that this is our land. Okay, so, Aboriginal people were too innocent, too naive to resist against such tyrannies. Okay, so many of them were prey to the violence. Okay, and this was a very cunning strategy adopted by the British colonizers in order to erase off the history, the value system, the culture, okay, the identity of the Aboriginal people. So, nowadays, till today, in the contemporary times, we call them multicultural country. But if you see initially, it was not multicultural. It was the land of Aboriginal tribes. Okay, so this white multiculturalism, this kind of theory was encouraged later. Okay, because they tried to dominate. They tried to erase the name of aboriginal identity in their land. They wanted to have their own domination in the land. Okay, so this was very dishonest by the colonizers, by the settlers. Okay, just because they were simple people, they were innocent people, they had no such historical records of their own. So they were an easy prey to the colonizers. Okay, so according to the colonizers, they called these aboriginal peoples, whoever they came in contact with, they said that they were brutal people. Okay, they lived in a dark world, they were savages, they had no idea about modernity. And we have come to civilize them. So in the name of white colonizing, they actually gave a lot of physical, emotional, psychological, culture shock to them. Okay, so this kind of idea was there initially, but very lately, very recently, this whole idea was revised, and many aboriginal people also, they excavated their identities, and now it is quite clear also it has been recorded recently in the history of Australian domain, that whatever original aboriginal people were claiming is true. Okay, anthropologically also it is proven that more than 60,000 years ago, Aboriginal people lived in that land. Okay, and this evidence also could be proved through many mythical stories of creation, okay, which talk about ancestral beings who are believed to have moved across the land in the process of in the process of seeking for nature and its consolation. Okay, and also they found many geographical sites, and they also found many evidences through the geographical sites and rules that they had different languages, they really existed. Okay, the science and DNA also proved their existence, which proved the whole theory of the colonizers wrong. Okay, so they were these white people, they constantly attacked these aboriginal people, and they were continuously harassed, they were tortured by the white people, and they had a lot of cold blooded violence also. Okay, they were once in a very bad condition, and British people said that these savage people had to be driven off for their safety. That is why they had to be violent by with these people. So, in the name of politics, in the name of establishing, a cultural society in Australia, they created a lot of violence towards these innocent Aboriginal people. Okay. Now, before colonizers set foot in Australia, there were hundreds of Aboriginal tribes. Okay, different clans were there, different tribes were there. Okay, and culturally also they were quite different from each other. Their languages were also different from each other, but still they had some kind of pan Aboriginal similarity. Okay, means overall, although these Aboriginal people were in pockets, which means they had different clans, but still they all together, if you see these Aboriginal people, they have some similarity in their identities. Okay, if you do a lot proper research, if you try to find out properly, you know uh, there what is the similarity with all these diverse groups of Australian Aboriginal people, then you will find out that there were very common features which was common to all the Aboriginal communities. So before colonizers came to the land, they had a they had a very simple social life. Their lives are very simple. Most of these or Aboriginal people either did fishing, they did hunting, they collected wood. So these were their primary occupation. Okay, and all these Aboriginal people, they had proper family and social structures. Okay, and they had very different kind of mutual relationship with each other in the society, and they had some typical beliefs and practices also. Okay, they did not have this hierarchy. Hierarchy means ooch niche, that we call in Hindi, means there is no one in the upper side, no one is the lower one. Okay, they had equality overall in their community. Okay, where only elder people, elder in age, they were highly respected. Okay, otherwise they had no other feeling of upper or lower classes. Now, this is important for you students. You must mark it, you must remember this, because whenever you write about Australian literature, and when specifically when you write about Australian Aboriginal tribes and Aboriginal literature, very often you have to use these phrases. First is dream time and dreaming. Okay. So, what is this dreaming? Actually, students, dreaming is a philosophical term. Okay, and which is which is a term very much regarded by the Aboriginal people of Australia. Okay, so dreaming is actually a spiritual term. Okay, and dream time means when the land and its laws were generated by the ancestral beings for the aborigines. So, part of dreaming is the most important and intrinsic element of aboriginal identity. Okay, so it is a matter of everywhere and everywhere. Okay, so it is actually a vision, it is a philosophical idea that connects past to the present. Okay, it connects one aspect to another aspect in nature. Okay, so if you see the meaning, the exact meaning of dreaming, then they consider that it is very sacred, and it is very heroic, that nature came to be as they are. Okay, so so they, according to them, nature is their owner, nature is their, everything is their provider. So dreaming actually means, it is a notion which is very sacred. Okay, and comes from their past history. Okay, and they believe that it is still there. Where and when they can connect themselves spiritually, uh, through the aspect of nature and natural elements. So dreaming in time, that is dream time. Now dreaming in time means dreaming in many things, means there's a kind of narrative here, uh, that that once happened, that a kind of thing that still continues to happen, that had happened, and that will continue to happen. Okay, so the transcendence of everything significant happens in time. So this is their belief. It is also the cosmic power. Okay, and this is how the whole order, whole system was created, which is in creation and which will be created. Okay, so overall, how the whole universe became a moral entity. This is what is the dream time. Okay, so actually, this dream time or dreaming, it brings aboriginals under one community. It brings them under one value system. Okay, and all these aboriginal, through this dream time, they believe in belongingness. Okay, they feel a pride about their mythical origin and history. Okay, so so this dreaming includes getting knowledge, calmness in their mind, and acceptance and tolerance. Okay, just like if you find in Hindu philosophy, how they believed in tolerance, how they believe in acceptance, how they believe in moksha. So similarly, these spiritual philosophies, by the Australian Aboriginal tribe, they call it dream time. Okay, so to this, there's a term for this. So they talk about how they balance, how they focus in life, how they think about their inner peace of mind, how they think about cleansing of the self, purifying the self, how you feel yourself as a complete entity. Okay, this comes through their understanding of the cultural roots. Okay, so here this term dreaming was coined by F. Gillen. F. Gillen, Gillen, Gillen in 1896. Okay, and this was further promoted by W.B. Spencer. So, actually, they had one Australian word. Okay, and that was inferred, understood in English as dreaming, dream time. So this has been used to refer to the creative epoch of the Aboriginal world in the religious myths and legends of those people. Okay, so yeah, so this dream time is very much connected to their religious myths and legends, which was believed by the Australian Aboriginal people. So later, this creative epoch, or what you call dream time, was given to the whole Aboriginal community, and they accepted it as a spiritual belief. Okay, but you can say that this is not a rule, but it is a myth. Okay, that connects one Aboriginal community with the other. Okay, they have the sameness in their spiritual insight. So spiritually they are very high, you can say, which is quite contrary to the British imperial power. So dream time for these Aboriginal people is a moment of creation. Okay. For them it is a moment of creation, the dream time, when ancestral people, okay, their ancestor, they were usually the you know the daily, working people, working class people, like they were kangaroo men. Okay, so they literally, these people, those who worked for their survival, they literally moved across the land. Okay, their ancestors. So this traces of their historical records, it created a permanent geographical contrast, means permanently they kept on moving and moving. So they also created man and woman and various laws for man and woman to follow. Okay, like the daily laws that you have to follow, pertaining to community, to the family living, to your uh, giving childbirth, to child rearing, to the making of a community after joining the community when you are when you come to your teenage, then marry, then do your job like hunting, gathering of food. You have to make your tools. If anyone has offended anybody, then that person has to be punished. You have to fight against illness, you have to fight against death. So they had all these chores that you have to follow in life. So when the ancestral beings, they gradually became tired, they stopped working. Okay, they rested while the youth worked. So this is the whole cycle of the life that was created, that was the rule was made by the ancestors, and which continue to follow. So this whole process, they call it as dream time. So it is not only about living life, but also it is about surviving, and also it is about their whole process of survival, including their spirituality, their inner beliefs, their convictions. Okay, so when it comes to their land, you will see that their ideology was quite opposite to the colonizers. According to colonizers, as I told you, they came to the land, they captured the land, and they said that we are landowners. But Aboriginal people, they were so simple in their lifestyle, and their dreamtime belief was that land was their owner. Okay, so whatever they needed from land, they took it, Aboriginal people, and they acknowledged to the land to be their owners. Okay, so this was very humble for them, of them. How they treated their lands, but they were treated very badly, very cruelly by the colonial intruders, and they were dislocated from their own community. They were thrown away to distant places by the British settlements. Now, when we look about their art, their literature, then initially the literature that they produced was initially oral. Okay, they had their oral culture, and orally, I was telling you in my earlier classes also, they used to pass down from one generation to another, their oral literature. Okay, they had their own stories, they had their own functions of storytelling, and they passed from one generation to another. Okay, so Aboriginal people, they ideologically believed in the dream time, means their creation and other cultural stories, and the environment, the nature in which they lived. So they created stories out of that, and they passed on to children. So if you see those stories, which were told to the children, was by the elders, was usually they had some thematic relevance. Through their stories, they taught their children about survival. Okay, that they, through their stories, they taught their children about moral values. So it was just like the Bible that you are reading. For these Aboriginal people, their oral stories were the Bible. Okay, where they taught their children all sorts of rules, regulations, laws. Okay, that is to be followed in the world. So aboriginal storytelling, actually they gave a lot of information, and they were a kind of best game, and they to be passed on to the next generation. Okay. And through their stories they taught their children how to, how to do their daily jobs, and where they are permitted to go, where they are not permitted to go, which is their sacred site. Okay. And what business they should conduct. So overall the storytelling was a kind of learning for the children, to show them the limits of their survival, and also how nature was an important aspect for them. This was passed on to their children, to their next generation. So this was called dreamtime storytelling. That was also, pictorially represented through various aboriginal art forms. They drew art, pictures. Okay. Through the pictures also they try to convey a lot of story. Okay. So they did not only tell stories about their community, their, their usual practices, but also they were quite rooted to nature. They acknowledged nature to a large extent. Now let us see how colonization took place. Okay. And how, aboriginal people reacted to this kind of colonization, and then what happened thereafter, that we are going to see. So if you see the earliest contact of the aboriginal people with the with these white colonizers. Okay. That we'll see. So here you can see that usually, initially when they came to their lands, it was mainly for trade and economics they came. Okay. And later, they, tried to settle there, and then, then Spanish people, Dutch, French people, they also arrived to Australia. Okay. So British settlement, when they arrived. Okay, so Aboriginal ways of life experienced a lot of shocking change. Initially, from many lands, people were coming in the name of business and commerce. Okay, that did not affect these Aboriginal people more. But when British people came, okay, when British people came into the land, so from that time onwards, these Aboriginal people felt a lot of, a lot of disturbance, felt a lot of change, felt a lot of imbalance in their society, because the impact of British people was highest to them. Okay, the whole life experience changed. Then what happened? Then Captain Arthur Phillip arrived in their land, okay, with his first fleet, and that changed the complete history of Australia. There what happened, you see, the two exact opposite ends met. Okay, two opposite cultures, means the Aboriginal people, they were very peaceful people, they were very modest people. Okay, they had a lot of respect to the land. They had to counter the Englishmen. Who were Englishmen? They were the products of industrialization. They were modern, they were progressive, they believed in competition, they were aggressive. Okay. And when they saw this newfound land, they wanted to capture it, they wanted to exploit it. So this was a clash of two different cultures, the meet of two different cultures. And for Aboriginal people, it was quite shocking to find such kind of people who are so aggressive about land. They had never faced this kind of people. Now they came to face to face with a new, with a new side of human existence, with the British. Okay. Now, when whites came, they were totally, against the concept of Aboriginal tribes. Okay. And, where Aboriginal tribes, they believed in preserving the tree, uh, maintaining the forest, and giving the land whatever they have taken, giving back the land whatever they have taken. This was their philosophy. But this was, this settlers' philosophy, colonizers' philosophy was just the opposite. They started, felling down the trees. They started clearing the ground. They started making their fences. Okay, before that, they had no idea about fences also. So, when Aboriginal people saw these changes, they are cutting down the trees, they became very angry. Okay, so now here what happened, not only whites disregarded Aboriginal people, but Aboriginal people now started disregarding the whites, disregarding the British, because they saw the British, they are exploiting natural resources. Okay, and they are not giving any permission. These British, they have come to their land and they have occupied their land, and they are not giving access to the aborigine to their own land. So these aboriginal people got furious, they resisted. Okay, uh, but they could not overpower the British because they had no plan, no warfare tactics. Okay, so they had to lose each time. Whereas if you see British people, they were quite ready with their modern ammunitions, and primitive system got nowhere close to their modern techniques. So each time Aboriginal people clashed against a British, they lost it. So what happened, gradually white people started expanding, they strengthened their settlements. All right. And they also, you must remember this, that as they started spreading their, in their settlements, they brought more diseases also. Okay. Which contracted the Aboriginal people. Initially, Aboriginal people were disease free people, but these British people, they brought many kinds of diseases with them to these lands, and many Aboriginal people contracted this disease also. Okay, and they did a lot of killing to these people. Lot of violence broke out between the British and the Aboriginal people, where Aboriginal people had to give away their lives. Okay, so in this way, the military also encroached upon the Australian lands. So although Aboriginal people tried to fight out, but they lost, so they ran away to different, more isolated areas. Okay. So colonizers, they came and they said that they are trying to whitewash all the aborigines. Okay, and they had their own agendas. Okay, so under the name of different agendas, actually they became very violent towards the aboriginal. They called them protection. They said assimilation. They said integration. They said that we'll have multiculturalism, but actually these were only sophisticated names and agendas to torture the aboriginal people. Okay, so they brought in a lot of policies, but overall these policies were to suppress the aboriginal Australians. Now, now if you see, as they try to settle in here, these British people, you will see that these European people, they did not allow aboriginal people any recognition in the law, in the administration. They kept these aboriginal people completely away from the modernity. Okay, only they just pretended that they're going to safeguard and protect the aboriginal under the policies such as Aboriginal Protection Act 1869. Okay, which was in Victorian period, but it was all for namesake. It did not have any, it did not have any genuinity. It was just name in the name of policy. Okay, now, so they said that um, they try to assimilate in their society. Means the colonizers said that they'll be assimilating. Assimilating means they'll be getting mixed up in their society, but that was nothing in practice. So the main objective of the colonizers was to render Australia white. They wanted to make whole Australia white. White means European. They wanted to completely wipe away all these Aboriginal people. Okay. So what they did, they tried to inculcate their beliefs to the Aboriginal people. They sponsored missionary schools, means English schools. So Aboriginal people, Aboriginal children were forced to learn English. They were forced to learn arithmetic. Okay, they were given the Western ideas of morality. They were forced to adopt all this British style. Okay, so in the name of developing them, modifying them, actually they were forcing their own theories, they forcing their own Western concepts of morality and livelihood. Okay, so in 1930s, they called it assimilation, but assimilation means when they will adopt their their host countries culture beliefs. Okay, but they were doing just the opposite thing. All right. So, when you go to different country, when you go to the host country, you have to assimilate, means you have to adopt their cultural practices. Whereas this British came in the name of assimilation, actually they were forcing their cultural, Western cultural practice to the Australian people. Okay, which was not actually assimilation, but which was actually domination. So this white cultural majority, they wanted to they wanted to subjugate, they wanted to dominate the Aboriginal people with their own codes of cultural standards. And in the name of assimilation, they forced they forced the Australian people to adopt their cultural practices. Okay. And then what happened later? A lot of racism took place because they were not whites, whereas European were whites. These Aboriginal people were non-whites. They were not whites, and they were not Western at all in that sense of the term. So a lot of racist practice also started, and when these British people adopted citizenship rights, then Aboriginal people were not given any citizenship rights. Okay, but after Second World War, these Aboriginal people could apply for rights. Okay, in that country they have to apply for the rights. Okay, so when a certificate of citizenship was issued, an Aboriginal person had to give up every relationship with his community. This was their law. If you want your citizenship certificate, then you have to give up all your relationship with your community, with your family. You become a different citizen. So, such a certificate in New South Wales was dubbed as exemption certificate. They called it exemption certificate. Means now you are no more Aboriginal. Now you are a common mass living in Australia. So that was called exemption certificate in New South Wales. So this allowed Aboriginal people to mix with the white society, and they were allowed to take all decisions about their life without any association with their family or friends. They have to come out of their own community. They have to become non Aboriginal if you want your citizenship certificate. Okay. So this is how they play tricks with this innocent, naive Australian Aboriginal people. Okay, so obviously, an Aboriginal tribe with good ego and self pride will not like this. Okay, will not like to accept the certificate for his own country. Okay, but for that he has to l- leave all relationship with his community or with his family. So many Australian Aboriginal people, they did not take this kind of certificate. They called it dog licenses. Okay. they did not accept. But later in 1961, there was a Native Welfare Conference where proper assimilation method was explained. Okay, so it said that all aborigines and part aborigines are expected to attain the same manner of living as other Australians and to live as members of a single Australian community, enjoying the same rights and privileges, accepting the same responsibilities, observing the same customs, and influenced by the same beliefs, hopes, and loyalties as other Australians. Okay, but you can see that uh, according to the expectation of the white community, Native Welfare Conference again redefined. So white community did not like this definition of citizenship. Okay, so these white people again made the whole certificate policy redefined, and what was added, the policy of assimilation seeks that all persons of aboriginal descent will choose to attain a similar manner and standard of living to that of other Australians and live as members of a single Australian community. So this was the policy. But this policy overall failed, not only because white nation was not accommodative, it was not appreciative enough towards aboriginal people, but also aboriginal people resisted this kind of policy because it was destroying their culture. Okay, because this policy is saying that when you want your citizenship, then you have to leave your culture, you have to leave your tradition and values. Okay, then only we will accept you. So many aboriginal people did not like it, did not want this assimilation certificate, because they knew that this will risk to the decay, to the death of their own culture. Okay, so this was not accepted by the people. Okay, so this was the problem of assimilation. Okay, which did not, become successful for the Australian people. Now they planned with the integration. Now, what is integration? Now, you know, uh, these British people and whatever they called for this native welfare conference of 1965, this was, you can see, this was sheer arrogance on the part of the British imperial power. Okay, and from this idea that aboriginal people must adopt the same manners and standard of living which was lived by white Australian people. So the concept changed to aboriginal people. They have the option to choose to attain similar manner. Okay, they had to adopt the white people's manners. Okay, so in this kind of artificial shift for assimilation, okay, so the purpose of the white nation remained the same. That was, they have to absorb into the dominant, to the mainstream, to the Eurocentric culture. So this Aboriginal culture will no more be there. You have to leave whatever culture you were in. Now you have to adopt our culture, the dominant culture, the mainstream culture, the Eurocentric culture. Okay. So when you see about assimilation, national unity was still the desired result. Okay. They wanted integration, but it was just this word they had played with integration. Now it had just become a means to achieve that end. They wanted to keep either aboriginal culture divided, or they wanted to extinguish that culture completely. Okay. So, in the name of integration policy, they had a lot of controversial uh, practices. All right, and they did not want at all to accommodate Aboriginal culture. Okay, so so for them, actually, integration meant the willingness on the part of dominant community to move towards minority groups. Okay, so actually, those people have to come to the minority groups. They have to follow the rules of minority groups. Okay, just as it is required them to move towards white. So blacks have to move towards white. So the majority at that time were aboriginal people. Okay, minority were the whites. Now whites said that you have to move towards us. Okay, but this remained unchanged. Okay, this remained just as a project. Okay, so white nation, those who were of different ethnic origin, they have to integrate, they have to unite into one community and become a single Australian community. Okay, but they did not, they had no idea of mixing with the my majority culture. But these this British imperial power, they wanted the blacks to change themselves, and they wanted to leave their culture and cultural practices. Okay, so that was the idea of integration that was manipulated by the imperial power. They made another policy. Okay, and that policy was called multicultural policy. Okay, so this multicultural policy, it was an aim to create white nation in Australia. Okay, so in the name of multicultural country, actually they wanted to establish white nation in Australia. Okay, and they wanted to show that they are very plural in their belief, in their society system. Okay, and when when a policy of labor federal government was formed in 1973. Okay, they claimed that they wanted plural culture, means they wanted to accommodate anyone who came here. So this policy has been widely criticized, okay, as being no better than promoting new ideology of white Australian people. Okay, so this was again new tactic, new trick to promote white culture in Australia. So, Australian multiculturalism was a policy for managing the consequences of cultural diversity. Different cultural people are there, and they will manage the consequence in the interest of individual and society as a whole. So, it was criticized. Okay, and why multiculturalism? Why things have to be gathered in such a mess? Actually, they understood that this was an aim to anglicize Australia. Okay, so anglicize Australia, and they want to rule by creating class differences. Okay, because if there is a multicultural means there will be minor culture, there will be major culture, and this way they are going to create an imbalance within the society. So this was understood by the intellectuals, and it was finally criticized. Okay, so actually, in the name of multicultural discourse, they wanted some colonial features in Australia. They wanted a grasp in Australia. Okay, so till now, these aborigines were colonized. Okay, they were exploited. They were institutionalized. Okay, or you can say that only they had become museum pieces in the white nation countries. Okay, so for them, multiculturalism meant nothing better than one among many ethnic group. Okay, so many ethnic groups are there, you are just one of them. And British will claim themselves to be the, European will claim themselves to be the major of them all. Okay, so this did not was not accepted. Your aborigines identity or indigenous identity was completely tormented. Okay, and this kind of multicultural idea, it actually gave a worse experience of colonization. All right. So many Aboriginal Australian people, they did not like. They attacked the idea of multiculturalism, and they believe that it is creating a kind of inequality. Okay, and they are going to, with this idea of multiculturalism, aboriginal people are just going to become any other, just any other ethnic minority. Okay, and they'll be sided off. So they understood this, they resisted, they did not like what was what the idea of this British were. So many aboriginal people, they objected to this idea. Okay, and they completely I rejected the purpose for the British to come to their land. Okay. Mm. But at the same time, you will see that still many settlers were pouring in, while at the same time, these Aboriginal people were resisting against such kind of intrusion into the land. Okay. Then what happened gradually as days passed, when they got their freedom from the British imperial power, then slowly, they started to have a reconciliation. They started to settle. Okay, so just give me 2 minutes break, students. Just a short break, I'll get back to you soon. Okay, so now we shall see how how gradually these aboriginal people were reconciled, and then how the society was established, that you will see. So you can see that after this first flight, um, you know these settlers, they tried to establish their land there, more and more in the interior part of the continent. Okay, so for them, you can call, their frontier was expanding, means they were acquiring more and more land, they were grabbing more and more land. Okay, so aboriginal people were getting farther and farther away from the land, and these European intruders were grabbing more and more the land and entering into the interior of the continent. Okay, so as I told you, as they were spreading and as they were grabbing more and more land, aboriginal people were reacting to this process. Okay, so they were simple people, but it doesn't mean that they were quiet. They were, very subversive. No, they were not. They were, reacting to the process of colonial expansion. They were openly fighting with the settlers. They were, destroying the livestock of the colonial power. They were attacking their homes. So resistance had already started from the initial days of the British settlement. Okay, so they both ways, openly also they fought against British. Okay, and in a hidden way also they resisted with the land grabbing process. Okay, so at one point of time, the European also felt threatened, that Aboriginal people were, getting more and more powerful. Atrocities were growing from the side of Aboriginal people. So after a few days, British showed their own power. They now started murdering Aboriginal people. They started raping their women. They started plundering their wealth. Okay, now they started torturing and providing violence to the Aboriginal people. Okay, so as Aboriginal people were simple people, they had never fought such kind of battle, so they lost continuously. They lost. Okay, although they resisted, but they lost. Okay, because the attacks were very unorganized. They were not used to with warfare. They had never fought wars. Okay, so they completely lost and they had to run away from the British intruders. Okay, and more in this way, the British came into the lands of the Australians. Okay, now this was followed by one later. Uh, they had lot of fights, lot of resistance, and then federation was formed. And then following that, they had one referendum was made in 1967. So on 27th May 1967, Australian government had already formed. In 1901, the government was already formed. So in 1967, Australian government amended some of the sections of Australian Constitution. Okay, and that related to the rights of Aboriginal Australian people. Okay, see, so late. These Aboriginal peoples have been constantly fighting, but see, the law is made for them so late in 1967. Now, this change resulted in the inclusion of Aboriginal people in the Australian census. Means when counting population will be done, they will be included. Okay, and they also enabled the Commonwealth to make laws for Aboriginal people. Okay, so the constitution was amended, and it said that the colonies would retain their powers to make laws concerning the Aboriginal people within their territory. Okay, so the constitution prohibited the federal government from making any laws about Aboriginal people. but it was expected that better laws would be provided to protect Aboriginal people. So 90% of the voter, they wanted laws to be made for Aboriginal people, and then clear mandate was formed in for the Aboriginal people. Okay. Then what happened gradually? Aboriginal people started to initiate their own organizations. Okay, means Aboriginal people were quite self-determined, and they formed a number of organizations, and that promoted Aboriginal cause for land rights, for their health, for security, for the legal rights, for education, for the economic well-being. Okay, so they formed an organization which will promote all these aspects of their well-being. Okay, so many such organizations are Aboriginal Legal Service. This organization was to protect the Aboriginal rights against victimization. Then another organization named Aboriginal Medical Service was started. This was to address the health issues of the Aboriginal people. Then Aboriginal Progress Association was formed. It was a group of Aboriginal political activists. Aboriginal Australian Fellowship was formed. This was for working for social and legislative reforms for the Aboriginal people. Another organization called APSCOL was formed. This was to, this was a national union of Aboriginal students of various universities. Anti-slavery society was formed for the abolition of all forms of slavery to which Aboriginal people were subjected. So these were few among many other organizations already given there in your study material that you can refer to. Okay. Now comes some major event here in the history of Aboriginal Australian case. The first is the Mabo case, MABO, Mabo case, and the second is the Native Title Act. Okay, so this is one of the historical milestones. Okay, ever since the Aboriginal people started their own movements, okay, and they were quite self-determined to, establish something for their own identity, for the sake of their own identity. So the Mabo case took place. Now, what happened here is in 1982, there was a person called Edward Cokie Mabo. Okay, now this man Mabo, along with his fellow named Mer Islanders, okay, Mer MER, Mer Islanders, these two people they filed a case in the High Court. Okay, now 10 years later, that is in 1992, a judgment was passed. Okay, and this was the most historical judgment, and this ruled in favor of the Miriam people. Now the High Court here held that uh, this Meriam people, they had the right to possess, to use, to occupy over their traditional land. Okay, they had the traditional land. Earlier, they had no right to occupy their land. Now they were given full freedom, full liberty to occupy their own land. So Miriam um, people, they are a kind of tribe. Okay, they are a clan. They are also kind of aboriginal tribe. So they were given now full independence to occupy their traditional land. Okay, and their rights should be protected by the law of the state. So this judgment, opened new what do you say, scope for the aboriginal people. Okay, so here what happened, six members of the court, they agreed that the common law for the country has to be recognized. Okay, so a form of native title, which will be the cases where it has not been extinguished, that will reflect the entitlement of the indigenous inhabitants in accordance with their laws of custom to their traditional land. Okay, so they were allowed to occupy their traditional land. So by this time, the judgment was passed in the High Court. Okay, but this Mebo had won the case, but this man, he died. Okay, but by the time the law was passed, this man had died. But it was a historical judgment, and that completely overturned the doctrine of terra nullius. Earlier, I told you terra nullius means it is an uninhabited land. So this judgment was just the opposite of terra nullius, where judge declared that no, they had their ancestral land and they have got full freedom to occupy their ancestral land. So it had the judgment was towards this aboriginal people. Okay, so this was a great historical moment for the aboriginal people of Australia. So this kind of judgment, it pressurized the government to pass new land dealing. Okay, new land rights have to be made. So when this pressure came, new land right was passed in 1993. That was named as Native Title Act 1993. Okay, it was known as Native Title Act 1993. This was a new land right for the Aboriginal people of Australia. Okay, so government at the same time, it assured that the non-Aboriginal people of Australia, okay, they had nothing to fear from the native title decision. Native title was given, na? The name Native Title Act was given. So white Australians or non-Aboriginal writers have nothing to fear from this title. Okay, it was just a title. Okay, it was just a step towards, towards making a reconciliation, or to developing a kind of mutual understanding between the aboriginal and the non-aboriginal people. Okay, so that they all live together, this discrepancy is reconciled, no more of differences, so that both of them could live equally with equal rights. Okay, so this law was amended from time to time, keeping in mind state's agenda of aboriginal self-determination. Okay, so you can see that by the end of 2007, many courts in Australia, they recognized 74 native title claims. Okay, so many people at that time, Aboriginal people, they got their lands. Okay, their ancestral land was again occupied by the Aboriginal people. All right. So slowly, they were given the rights. As we moved on to, more modernity, when we moved on to more cosmopolitanism, so again the Aboriginal people were given the rights. Okay. So this is what is reconciling. So reconciliation was done finally. Now we'll move on to some literature now. We are enough of history of Australian Aboriginal people. We'll see some Aboriginal novel. Okay, and here this novel. the famous novelist of the writing Aboriginal literature is Kim Scott. Okay, Kim 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 Scott Scott. Okay, he has written famous novels like True Country and That Dead Man Dance. Okay, so you already know, I've already told you that the storytelling is already there in the blood and bones of the Aboriginal people. Okay, storytelling practice. Okay, and this storytelling talent, it gives a special identity to the Aboriginal people. Okay, and that was what was dream time. Earlier they called it dream time. So this dream time formed the primary basis to original novel writing also. Okay, remember this. Dream time held a primary basis to aboriginal novel writing. So these, as I told you, these oral dreamtime stories were meant to, educate. It meant to entertain people. It taught moral value at that time. So this kind of story now again came into formation, and it gave, new what do you say, perspective to the Western modes of learning. Okay, this was completely new, whereas you see the Western world was completely mechanical, methodical, but these people were quite aesthetically aware, to keep a balance between aesthetics and storytelling and learning. Okay, so this is very important for people to acknowledge, which was a very initial talent of the Aboriginal Australian people. Okay, so one of these primary Dreamtime written documentation was most probably by David Unipian. He had written a story called Legendary Tales of the Aborigines. It was published in 1930. Okay. Then another writer called Colin Johnson, he had written Mudruru. Okay, then he had written Wild Cat Falling in 1965. This was considered to be the first Aboriginal novel. Please remember this. Colin Johnson has written Mudruru. Okay, it means Wild Cat Falling. It was published in 1965, first Aboriginal novel. Okay. Now there was a little controversy for the identity of who Mudruru is. Okay. Uh, so uh, Yes, so there was a controversy regarding the identity of Mudruru. So that made Monica Clare, another writer, posthumously after she died, her book, her novel, Caro Brand was published in 1978. Okay, so Monica Clare's Caro Brand, it was a pioneering work in Aboriginal novel writing. Okay, so these novels, along with lots of other Aboriginal novels, followed one after another that talked primarily about the Aboriginal identity in the middle of white colonization. Okay, now when we talk about Kim Scott, that will be the discussion now. Kim Scott entered this scene of Aboriginal novel in 1993. Okay, with his novel called True Country, and his second novel was followed. Uh, its name is Benang from the Heart. The name of the novel is Benang, Benang from the Heart. This was published in 1999. So in 2010, again, Scott published that Dead Man Dance. Okay, that Dead Man Dance. This is a novel that talks about cross cultural relationship. Cross culture means between white and the aborigines. Okay, there's another writer, Adam Shoemaker. He had published his novel called Black Words White Page, Aboriginal Literature. Okay, 1929 to 1988. So it talks about the case of Aboriginal creative writing. So this is a book, this is a text, not a novel. It talks about Aboriginal creative writing. It talks about the literature and the actual events that involved in different novels. which were extremely naturalistic. Okay. Now we will see a bit about Kim Scott and his novels. Kim Scott is an Aboriginal novelist. So not only is a novelist, but he has written many short stories also. He has written poems as well, and he's an activist also. So his main purpose of writing is to be very clear. Okay, and he says that once he is seem to be saying like this. He's saying that, I'm quoting, as a writer, it seems to me that my identity is about articulating a position I inhabit at an interaction of histories and peoples. And it is an obligation to speak for those people in my family who history has silenced. And by attempting this, to step forward with a heritage largely denied me. So he said that, I belong to a heritage, but it was denied by history because history was mainly written by the colonial counterpart, by the white Australians, okay, by the non Aboriginal peoples. Now I take the privilege of writing about my people, about my own identity. Okay. So when they were denied, Kim Scott says that when they were denied their own Aboriginal identity, okay. So now when he is given his identity back to him by law and by the court, by justice, now he is re-narrating his family history. Okay, from the perspective of a marginalized and dispossessed community. We were dispossessed from our own land. We were thrown away from our own land. Now, I'll be re narrating that history from my point of view. That will be the prominent theme in my novels, Kim Scott is saying. Okay. Now, yes, Scott's, tribe is called Nungar. It is, spelled as Nungar. Nyungar, Nyungar people. Okay, and this Nyungar people, they are the Aboriginal people of southwestern Australia. Okay, so his group is known as Wallomin, and he is the elder of four children. His parents had four children, and he is the eldest among them. He was born out of white mother, but his father was Aboriginal. Okay, so the name of his extended Nungar family is Roberts. Okay, it belongs to Roberts family. Now in 1960s, he moved, with his family to the southern coastal town of Albany, and later, while he was studying in a school in Narrogin, he had his first idea with racism. Okay, what was racism? He came to know there in that school, and he was not able to erase that kind of experience in his life when he had faced racism. Okay, so Scott, overall, you will see that he's very famous nationally as well as internationally, and two of his novels, Binang and that Dead Man Dance, it has received highest prestigious award also in Australia. Okay, and it has received the Miles Franklin Award. So now Scott is the professor of writing in the School of Media, Culture and Creative Arts in a university there called Curtin University. From 2011, he's been working as a professor. Okay, and he's a member of the Culture Center for Culture and Technology. And now he's leading its Indigenous Culture and Digital Technology Research Program. Now we'll see some of his novels. First one is True Country. Now, True Country in this novel, actually Scott had spent some of his, early years in variety of jobs. Okay, he has done variety of jobs in his early career, and one such job was uh, to work in a remote school in one Aboriginal community in the north of Western Australia. So this experience gave him to write his first novel, True Country. Okay, so the story of the novel, I'll tell you. The story actually brings to attention Aboriginal issues like extreme poverty, drug abuse, then domestic violence and racism. Okay, so these are all the main concerns. These are the main themes of the novel True Country. So the center character here is Bill. Bill is a part Aboriginal school teacher. Okay, part Aboriginal he is, and he is a school teacher. Um, and he comes from a community, Aboriginal community called Karnama community. Okay, so Billy here, his light skin means he's fair, and people usually consider him to be a white man. Okay, they consider him to be white, but actually he's part Aboriginal. So Billy finds out for himself the state of the community, Tarman community, what all consequences they have already seen being Aboriginal that he heard up from somebody. Okay, so the young generation, if you see that Billy thinks that young generation has failed to hold on to the traditional values and myths of their community because they have been whitewashed in the modern lifestyle. So further, Billy's upbringing, which was very much like white people, calls him to question his Aboriginal identity. Okay, so the obvious reason here. For the assimilating work he was doing, like white Australian, made him little disturbed because he was not white. Although his complexion was white, but he comes from a Aboriginal clan, so he wanted to find out his spiritual truth. He wanted to find out his identity about his community. He wanted to find out about himself. So Billy tries to make a research, tries to search for his identity, who he is. Okay, certainly he is not a white Australian. Okay, he is a mixed identity. So exactly who he is, he tries to make a research of that. Okay, so he searches both his social and cultural background. Now Billy recovers the meaning of true Aboriginal identity. After doing a lot of research, Billy finds out what it is to be a true Aboriginal. Okay, both as individual and both and in community level as well. So in this process of recovering Aboriginal identity, he is joined by a number of members of his own community. He belonged to Karnama community, and he here when he was searching for his own identity, he comes in contact with many other people from Karnama community who usually orally narrated their stories. Okay, and they culturally subverted the white nation state. They did not talk good about the white counterparts. Okay, these other Karnama community people, they did not have good idea, good opinion about those white counterparts because they were colonialist. They had modernist policies and projects. So this was not very much appreciable for this Karnama community people. So, at the same time, as identity is internally different, it's slippery now. Okay, this Billy comes to a very unstable situation. He is now trying to reclaim a true Aboriginal identity. So that becomes, very much shaky now at this point of view when he comes face to face with white community and the Aboriginal community. So he says that if storytelling is an alternative narrative, it's a common public culture with the Aborigines, which recollect memory, which fashions with the help of myth. Then the same identity building technique has been used consciously, and Scott here, to act as a tool of subversion, he makes his true identity come to the forefront. Okay, that he belonged to one neglected community, but how their tradition, how their values have survived the test of times, and how now he is able to write it. So that brings in a lot of strength for Scott as an Aboriginal writer. Okay, so now Scott in this novel, he not only appropriates the the economical canonical standards of writing novels, but his standards makes a standard language structure. Okay, but also he mixes a lot of magic and realism with the dream time spirituality that I had already explained. So these stories by Scott, they help fill in the gaps and the lapses which are there in documenting history. What history was not able to capture, Scott is with his research, with his lot of realism, he tries to capture what was missed by history, what was left out by history. Okay, so he documents very broadly. He talks about the white missionaries. Okay, how the revival of the the poor culture revived. Okay, of the community, and how the whole resistance was going on at some point of time. So Scott discovers here a true country, and a true aboriginal country rather, that could be realized without the apparent truth. Now, the next novel is The Dead Man Dance. Now, this is the latest novel which was published in 2010. Okay. Now, this novel also, it is part fictional, part historical. Okay, because it gives a broad account of the relationship between white people and a certain clan of aboriginal people called Nungars. Okay, Nungars. So between white people and the aboriginal people called Nungars during the early settlement. Okay, now he talks about the early settlement, that is in the early 19th century. Okay, and that happened in Western Australia. So here the novel talks about a lot of cross-cultural relationship between two races that began on a note of friendship. These two races, white and Aboriginal, that started with a note of friendship. Okay, because these Aboriginal people were very simple, were naive, they were open to acceptance. Okay, but their belief was eroded away by the colonizers because they became racist. Okay, and they had this assimilationist tendency. They had a lot of greed. They were capitalistic. They were exploitative people. Okay, and they tried to institutionalize the native issues. Okay, so slowly, Aboriginal people were cheated by the colonizers. Uh, so this is very much broadly described by that Dead Man Dance. So this novel is about the struggle of the Nungar tribe. Okay, from the beginning when the colonizers came, and how they struggle to hold themselves tied to their culture so that their culture won't get lost. Okay, so the colonizers were so dominating that they wanted to wash away their culture, but how they held tight to their culture and ethnicity even during the rough days. Okay, by the Western ways, they wanted to curb their own whole culture, but how these tribal people, how these Aboriginal people stay stuck to their culture, they did not allow it to die. That is the point of heroism on the part of the Aboriginal people, and that has been acknowledged by Scott. Okay, so when white people were very violent at some point of time, they were promoting their programs very very cunningly to marginalize the Aboriginal people, and how their identity was considered by white as outsiders. Okay, whites were the outsiders, but they treated the Aboriginal people as outsiders. That was very much disturbing for the Aboriginal people. So the whole event has been given by Scott in his novel That Dead Man Dance, and the story is narrated with lot of direct attack. Okay, directly attacks. It has no sympathy, no whitewashing, and it has lot of musical effect also. The novel is very sensitive and emotionally very evocative, and it is a mesmerizing recollection of the past. through the eyes of both white and aboriginal people. So the story begins with a prologue. There's a prologue by the linchpin character called Bobby Wabalagini, who later in his life as an old tourist guide recollects a good part of the story. So the prologue is by Bobby Wabalagini. He tells the story. Okay, he's a tourist guide, and he gives a good narration of the part of the story. Okay. Now Scott's next writing is Benang from the Heart. Okay. Okay. Now Benang and Neville, we'll see. Neville here is present in Benang's character. Okay, Neville, Neville. He is present in Benang's as a character. Now he is the distant relation of the protagonist of Benang, Harley's grandfather, Ernest Solomon's cat. Okay, so Benang as a novel is an answer to the to the project of Neville, and successfully destabilizes, and how it um, makes a critical inquiry of the whole land of Australia is given here. So Scott here frequently quotes from the works, articles, and letters of Neville, and he appropriates them to deconstruct Neville's attempts to establish supremacy over the Aborigines. So Neville is a British colonial colonizer. He wanted to establish supremacy over Aborigines, and Scott here shows how and what attempts have been taken to completely, nullify all the ideas of Neville. Okay, so Neville's colonial project was to breed out the Aborigines. Means culturally and socially, they have to forget their own origins, according to Neville. Okay, so this is attacked by Scott. So Scott is not only introducing readers to a key historical figure in the abuse of the Aboriginal people, but he is also trying to make a mimicry of Neville's colonial, strategy of catching and containing indigenous people. Neville wanted to, contain to stop the indigenous people, and to completely kill their culture. So here Scott is actually mocking, he's criticizing uh, Neville's perspective. Okay, and that is in his novel Benang. So Scott here himself is talking about the positioning of Neville in the in this fiction, in this novel. Okay, so although Neville was a huge influencing figure at that time, who wanted to wipe out the culture of this Australian Aboriginal people. So here he says that Neville is shown by Scott in this novel as the engineer. He's the engineer of some corrupt ideology. Okay, and is definitely the most corrupt practitioner of how to colonize people. Okay, so this Neville actually represents a character which is very dark. Okay, and which is always up to colonizing others, colonizing the Aboriginal people. So around this, the whole novel moves around, and you can call it a historical fiction. Okay, where all the darker side of the whole whole what do you say, whole colonizer's perspective stand. All right. So, with this, I am going to end today's class. Next, when we meet tomorrow, we'll be talking about the multiculturalism in Australian domain, how multicultural literature and multicultural novel particularly took its form and shape that we are going to do, that we shall be doing tomorrow. So, until now, I sign off today with these ideas of Aboriginal Australian novels. So, tomorrow we are going to continue. So, I stop my class here.